sort of delivering it in the United States.
Great, thank you. So good evening, welcome. Hope everyone is well and remains healthy during these very challenging times. We will be recording the program, as I mentioned, for those who can't attend, so we kindly request that you mute yourself to reduce the background noise. My name is Jen Miroff, and on behalf of the Racial Justice Subcommittee of the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, made up of Kathy Leonardson, Pat Costello, Susan Lafredo, Sue McCallie, Bedna Lacombe Haywood, Tracy Brown, and Palma McLaughlin, thank you for joining us this evening. We are delighted to host Representative Russell Holmes on this historic day for the 5th discussion in our series on the state of police reform in the Commonwealth. We have hosted Rep. Miranda, Rep. El Ugardo, Chair Gonzalez, and we had a discussion on qualified immunity. We welcome our LWVMA Executive Director, Patty Comfort, and our LWVMA Co-Presidents, Elizabeth Foster Nolan and Judy Zombrocker. To ground us in our discussion, allow me to share our League positions on racial justice. The League of Women Voters is committed to racial justice at the local, state, and national levels. To quote our president, Dr. Deborah Ann Turner, we must address the ongoing and inexcusable violence against Black people in our country. We strongly oppose the systemic racism that allows violence like this to occur repeatedly. The League remains an ally to those leading the work for social justice, and we encourage all leagues to advocate for Black lives and nonviolent protest. At the national level, the LWVUS passed an urgent resolution at National Convention, Racial Justice for Black People and All People of Color, drafted by current director, Bedna Lacombe Haywood. The resolution states, first, the League advocates against systemic racism in the justice system and at a minimum for preventing excessive force and brutality by law enforcement. We also call for prompt actions by all League members to advocate within every level of government to eradicate systemic racism and the harm that it causes. LWVMA has advocated for police reform and accountability legislation every step of the way. We are honored to welcome Representative Russell Holmes this evening, who has been fighting and advocating for these reforms for a decade. Elected in November 2010, Rep. Holmes represents Massachusetts' 6th Suffolk District, which includes a portion of the communities of Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park, Roslindale, and Jamaica Plain. He serves on the House Committee on Bonding, Capital Expenditures, and State Assets, Committee on Ways and Means, Committee on Election Laws, Public Service, and the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. And now I will turn the conversation over to my colleague, Bedna Lacombe Haywood, Director and DEI Chair of LWVMA. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and welcome Bedna and welcome Rep. Holmes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And thank you so much, Rep. Holmes, for joining us this evening. I know that you are doing double duty, and so we will not take any more of your time. I just wanted, I also want to thank everyone for joining us as well and taking your time on this Tuesday evening. I just wanted to kind of just talk about the bill. So the bill came out yesterday out of the bill came out yesterday out of committee, and the Senate has already voted on it with 28 yeas and 12 nays. Could you frame this bill by giving us some historical context to its formation, which started close to 10 years ago?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me tonight. I know I got an email just early today asking should we continue, and I think absolutely, because it is because of your advocacy, I think, as well as so many other advocates, for why we've gotten to where we are today. And certainly, as you just mentioned, with the bill passing 28 to 12 and what is deemed the liberal of the two, most liberal of the two chambers, it continues to just show how strong, it continues to just show how strong police unions are and how difficult it's going to be to still get this bill passed. And so tonight really is another advocacy from my perspective to you to simply say, we still need to push this past the governor, as of course, he's the next leg of this. I'm hopeful that of course we were going to pass the bill in the House tonight. So with 28 votes in the Senate, that means we only have one extra vote because to override the governor's veto, you need to have at least 27. And so we did have one extra vote in case the governor does send this bill back. Why is that important? That is important because, as you know, we thought we were going to pass this bill at the end of July, is December 1st, and we are really limited on a sense of timeline of what needs to happen if he does send the bill back, and we have to begin this debate again. And quite frankly, I get more and more concerned the longer this debate goes on. As you know, or may know, the bill passed in the Senate the first time 30-7, with some people abstaining. So let me frame the bill historically. The bill, as I know it today, I know folks have been working on it for 10 years. The thing that I've been working on most is around POST, Peace Officer Standard and Training, which is really the core of the bill, which is we began this process by first saying it was so difficult to believe that we can get it done. We thought, hey, why don't we set up a commission to figure out what can be done for POST? And year after year, a Republican rep, one of the Republican reps and I, we filed this bill together. He did training on peace officer standard and training across the Commonwealth, across the country, but never in Massachusetts because it wasn't even allowed in Massachusetts because we didn't have a post system. And so about a year and a half ago or so, maybe in 2 years at this point, the governor agreed with the Black and Latino caucus, who meets with him quarterly, that I guess I've been really persistent, been so persistent for so long, and the other members who joined in started to say, let's do something. And so when you hear this conversation, well, the speaker's done this grand thing, or this Senate president has done this grand thing, and that we now have a independent body. That really is very different than where we began this conversation. We began it with the governor because of the fact that we felt as though we can only get the executive branch to agree. And so Secretary Tucker and his team and others said, okay, if we're going to try to get something done, let's draft a bill with the caucus around what we can do in just EOPS, the Executive Office of Public Safety. The unfortunate murder of George Floyd, of course, aroused everyone. And we now, in the Black and Latino caucus, we met with the governor. He, of course, agreed with the bill. We released the bill with some edits. We met with the speaker, and the speaker said, hey, I firmly believe we should do something similar to what we've done for both casinos and for cannabis. And that was obviously welcome news to us to have an independent body. The other thing that happened in that meeting, I think that was important, is for those who don't know, I have a very contentious relationship with the speaker. And we agreed in that meeting to kind of just put the swords down and try to work on this together because this is that important. So POST, Peace Officer Standard and Training, will now allow us to set a minimum standard for what every officer in this Commonwealth should have for training. What do I mean by that? You will have some officers who are just part-time police officers who might be getting 200 hours worth of training, 300 hours worth of training before they're on duty. Or you can have the state police who are getting 1,250 hours worth of training. Those are two very, very different sets of parameters. And of course, when you're only getting 200 or 300 hours worth of training, you're not getting that implicit bias training. You're not getting many, many things that are important to the community I represent, which is 70% of Black, 92% of color. So we're going to have a standard for what we're going to require for training. And then most importantly, we're going to have what we call decertification. We will now be able to decertify police officers and take their license. That was not something that was at all possible. So POST is there. The next thing that we wanted to do was look at civil service, which is today when I tell you we have a civil service department, we are now voting on the bill. So I will do my best to hear my name be called and then hop on and say yes, and then go back to what we're saying. They're at Higgins, so I'm going to go home in a moment. I'm a yes.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Right,
Congratulations.
So we will see what the vote is. And so the next thing is around civil service. For those who may have heard me say, we have a police department like our state police that is 95% male, 90% white. That is certainly not reflective of this Commonwealth. And a lot of that is driven by our civil service and where that's managed, veterans preference and the like. which is a part of this bill. We had some rules around use of force. Chokeholds is what everyone talks about, but duty to intervene so you won't have it so that people will stand around and watch like what happened in George Floyd and not be held accountable. And we've had some conversations around, or in the bill is no knock warrants. And Rep. Miranda made sure that we put in that there's a provision that now has it so that if you know there's children or someone over 65, particularly in the Breonna Taylor case, things of that nature, that you don't go and just bang in someone's door and knock it in. So that is post civil service reform to try to get out some more diversified police, fire, EMS, quite frankly, what to do about use of force. And then there was a lot in the bill around structural racism. And so when I heard you describing what is the league's perspective on this assistance of people of color, and you kept saying the word structural racism, just know that I've sat down with, I was recently golfing with some folks, and there were some white men who made it very, very clear to me that they feel that white men in particular do not believe in structural racism. And I thought that was interesting that they wanted to make it just men, and then you, as the League of Women, were saying something very different. They feel as though that word is a bad word and can never understand it. And to hear that you are definitely you're unapologetically saying you believe that there is structural racism in our systems is also very important. That bill, or that final piece of the bill that the caucus thought was very, very important, really came from folks who are locked up. There's a group called the AACC at the MCI Norfolk, which really wanted to make a point that they didn't just arrive in jail just one day. They arrived in jail with many, many things,
I get
education,
access.
transportation, and the like that got them to prison. And so they worked with Rep. Elgato, myself, and others to draft some language around structural racism. We have now put that through corrections, parole, probation, and the like. And then we've also emulated some things from President Obama around My Brother's Keeper to really focus on Black men and boys and some of the structural racism that comes there. There's so many pieces, but I don't want to have to just go through them all. There's been things around what we're going to do about facial recognition, what we're going to do about the fact that with facial recognition that folks just kind of go and query to RMV and just ask them, hey, tell us who this person is. The RMV will now have to have a public facing database that will sorry, I'm getting texts on some of these no votes and things of that nature. So we'll have a count here while I'm on this phone call where we are in the House. I'll stop there and I'll take questions. How about do that? And then I'll take my mic so I can give you guys a better count as well.
I'd like to go back to just the post and could you just, I guess, speak on the fact that we are one of 4 states in the nation that does not have this as a part of our legislation?
Sure. So there have been thousands, I think some in the neighborhood of 35 or so thousand officers who have been decertified all across this country. For many variants of reasons, whether it be
So the mass legislature had
whether they have relationships with someone that may have been in custody, things of that nature. Massachusetts, I forgot you had asked me to find out what all the 4 states were, but Massachusetts is just one of 4 states that does not have that. I'm sure I could Google it for you very quickly, but 46 of the other states, or you want to include Puerto Rico, have already this in place. And so what we're doing today is going to be very similar to what you're going to hear to other states. But what we're adding to our post commission is an enormous amount of power to subpoena and to take the decertification. And also in the post commission will be citizens, not just law enforcement. The law enforcement folks, there are 2 things that they, of course, were most upset about. One is this conversation around qualified immunity, which I can tell you, Ayanna called me right away when it was not strong enough for her. And we had a long conversation about that today. And then 2, well, not that long, but she made it clear where she was, and she's made that clear for quite some time, because this has been one of her main things at the federal level. But also, the other thing they were very concerned about was the makeup of the board. Quite frankly, there are 9 people on this board that's going to decertify officers, and quite frankly, I'm sure they wanted all 9, then they wanted a majority of 5, but then we ended up with 3, and that has been one of the inks as well. Just know that with qualified immunity, some I can tell by some of the reaction, many of you know exactly what I'm referring to. The thing that resonated with many of the people in this building is that the spouses of police officers literally were emailing and calling the State House to say, hey, if qualified immunity is eliminated, you're going to say that you're saying that you can literally come take my home, you can come take my property. And that resonated with quite a few folks. And that is why it also did not get as far as we would like. I can tell you, even on my phone calls with 20 of us, I heard quite a few no's in their vote. So I will be very curious what the final number is.
Thank you.
But I
Thank
say
you
a
very
bit
much.
more about civil service. So civil service, if someone today if you want to just Google Massachusetts civil service, quite literally, you can go and you can say, you'll see when you Google it, there's a list, and that list will tell you all the folks in order of essentially how they're going to be hired. You can say police and you can go to Boston, or you can say fire and then you can go to Boston. You can see the list of exactly how when it's time to hire a new officer, who will get those phone calls. Civil service, when I'm sure when we did this 100 years ago or so after World War I, when it first became something that everyone thought was the right thing to do, which it still is the right thing to do in many ways. There was a thought that, hey, if someone comes back from serving in World War I or whatever it may be, in particular if they were disabled, then they should have a, what is that, 107? Oh, no, I thought you were giving the number. I apologize.
No.
I thought someone was giving me the number because I hadn't heard it in my ear yet. Particularly if you were disabled, they said we should have a veteran's preference to make sure that, we can have these folks who just served our country with all these civil service jobs be able to have a preference for veterans. And then we should have even more of a preference for disabled veterans so that they can make sure that if they have been disabled, that we can find a role for them. That certainly is, I still feel the same way. As though that was a very good idea. But unfortunately, for me, from my perspective, as unions have gotten more and more powerful over the last 100 years, we now have it such as like a disabled veteran will be the entire list of the first hundreds of people for, let's say, Boston Fire. Now, can you imagine, and when you think of that, the most rigorous job that you can possibly imagine, carrying up hoses, up ladders, danger, burst into buildings. If we have 100 people who are hired as in a class, 40 people hired in a class, 100% of those will be disabled veterans because disabled veterans have an absolute preference. What do I mean by that? You go to the top of the list. So if you score 75 and I score 95 and you're a disabled veteran, you still go to the top of the list in Boston. And so, and some of this disability is essentially folks have been pretty much coached that once you arrive back from service, you kind of go over to wherever you go to get your status. But if you have a certain denigration of hearing, you're disabled. And so that then gets you that disabled veteran status. And so quite frankly, almost everyone who goes away to war is going to come back with some denigration of hearing. And so many folks do that and then go right to the top of the list. And I just think that there must be a more fair way to have it so that you should not have it so that essentially everybody who wants to be on police and fire have to have gone and served war or gone and served in the military. I think of it as, and I can tell you when I had this conversation first with the governor and lieutenant governor sitting on one side, lieutenant governor sitting on the other side of me in one of our caucus meetings, I said to them, I said, just think about it. A veteran from, I forget what I used, Wyoming or whatever, shows up, stays here for a year, and then has more rights to opportunities for jobs than the person who grew up in Massachusetts, who knows, for me, Morton and Blue, I live in Mattapan, like knows how to get to Morton and Blue and doesn't need a GPS when something goes down. That person has more of a right to that job from Idaho or wherever than the person who grew up in the neighborhood. So those are tough conversations because they always are going to be tough around veterans. And that's what we want to have a conversation about with civil service.
Thank you. Thank you. We have several questions here in the chat. We have a question. The bill seems to create a number of commissions for study. How often do such commissions result in bills and actions that get voted on versus being used to say something was done and nothing gets done?
So I can say that has been historically one of the things that I hear. Oh, you put something in study and nothing gets done. I can tell you every commission I've ever served on,
Mhm.
we like I can tell you with the commission around what to do for public housing. I served on the Public Housing Commission. We came out with an array of many changes that we had. I can tell you, I served on the EBT Commission. Some folks were not very happy with me serving on that commission, but we came out with an enormous amount of changes. I think each one of the commissions that we're talking about around structural racism are going to be much stronger, make it much stronger for us in the Black and Latino caucus, because it should not just be on the 15 members of the Black and Latino caucus to try to shepherd all of these challenges that we're hearing. We need to have data, we need to have paid people, we need to have staff, and that can't just be on our one staff person. So there are quite a few number of commissions, but we're hoping that one, many of us in the caucus will serve on those, but then two, that they will indeed inform so much of the legislation that we think needs to be done. If this passes, I can just tell you, we are looking ahead to years of work, because there's an enormous amount of work that we have to do around structural racism. And I'm hoping certainly many of the people in the league decide to serve on some of these commissions, because we need your valued voice.
Right. We have another question that actually kind of speaks to what you've just mentioned in terms of like the work going forward. With hope that the bill passes and is signed, what are you hoping will be next steps regarding racial equity and accountability for law enforcement?
So I think the most basic thing that I look forward to is a leveling of the playing field. And some of you may have seen one of the press conference where I said it is important to me that when someone pulls me over, that they take my ID and they go back and they run my background with my license, that at the same time I can look at their name and run their background and their license and know have they had any disciplinary issues in the past, where they used to work, things of that nature. I think there's an incredible amount of leveling that needs to happen just when you're walking down the street. You should be able to know who it is in front of you and not have people essentially hiding behind their badge. I mean, I don't know how many times people say, well, give me your badge number, and people get all cocky about it. I just think that when it comes to this balance or this racial justice piece, it is very important that we don't continue to have it so that I know many of you don't live in Boston, but and for me in Boston, it's still, to me, it's crazy that the 775th highest paid employee in our city is the mayor, and that almost all those people above him are police and fire. And I think it sends a culture that is of inequity, when so much of the police and their overtime and things of that nature is around neighborhoods like mine that are poor. So here it is, you may have a neighborhood like mine in which average income may be $40,000 a year, but you guys are walking through my neighborhood making $300,000. And so it almost feels like, you forget that you still are accountable to us. And I think that's so much what the bill does, because of the fact that now there will be some clearly articulated requirements that I can go and know you're going to get fired. What do I mean by that? It is now articulated and clear and on this board that if I know that you've lied under oath, we know eventually when that's proven, you're going to get fired. If I know you've tampered with evidence and that's proven, we know you're going to be fired. There's no more of this, oh, I'm going to now go to arbitration, go to my mediator, go to my courts, go wherever, whatever, for a year and a half, 2 years, and then end up with your back pay for the year and a half, 2 years you've been sitting.
Oh, goodness.
All right, so it's 92-67 to let you know what the final vote was. 92-67.
Wow.
Can we just take a moment and just congratulations. That's wonderful. You've been working for so long. So congratulations. We're so happy to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Take a breath.
I will try to make my answers shorter than the ones that I've been giving. So give me the next one.
Okay. Does the bill require publication of these of results of decertification?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Let me see if I can go through. What
There's
is the
also some pieces and fix
Oh.
in here, like there's small little things like
Mhm.
expungements in this. So we've heard a lot about expungement where you could only have one thing that's sponge. And so in the bill, what happens is you now can have a single incident that may have had multiple charges related to that incident. And so instead of that being something that you can only go get one of those charges expunged, you can have that all the things in that incident expunged. And so you can have two of those. And so stuff like that we're going to change as well. I apologize, but
Oh, it's
there's
okay.
so many other things inside the bill other than just the post.
Okay. What is the relationship of the state law, if passed, to local laws around police reform? State authority over locals, which takes precedent?
Always state.
Okay, right. The
So
power.
someone just texted with the less than 2/3 vote. That means it does put a lot more power in the governor's hand. So that's why I was saying to you,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the league needs to start to work the governor. We felt it's going to probably be about the same as it was last time with 66. Now 67 people voted against it. We now still need to work the governor.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that was another question. Absolutely. Do you believe? Okay. Let's see here. The power the police unions have. How did they gain it, and has it strengthened over the years?
Well, it is getting more and more powerful every single day. How do they gain it? Now, so here's what I believe the power and how they gain it every time. And that is almost all the police forces today are former military people because of this veterans preference. And so it is very difficult to walk in a room and negotiate with nothing but heroes. And so you have this hero worshiping that happens essentially every time it's time to negotiate with our law enforcement. And so you see enormous raises, you see enormous protections. As you know, when we lose the life of any one of them, police or fire or EMS, you see um, cars pull over the side of the road, and you see an escort that happens for sometimes 100 miles. And so when those are the people that you're negotiating with, um, and you have that sense of hero worshiping that's happening, they gain more and more and more and more power every time you negotiate with them. And so I think that's really the core of where much of this began, when you have essentially an entire staff that is former military.
Okay. You talked about the civil service exam, and someone has asked about it being racially biased, but it's biased towards more so, or like military in a sense,
Oh no, that's just
and
so
some others.
there's more
Speak on
there.
it.
There's more
Yes,
there. It's like,
yes,
I mean, it's and you do see that we're getting rid of ACT, SATs, and
yes.
all of the other stuff that deals with this racial biases with testings and things of that nature. And a lot of this also is about income.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that that we have seen over the last year that some of the people in the scandal around what happened with, I can take this off now. What happened with Varsity Blues? Here it is, families that have had privilege for their kids their entire lives still go out and pay for enormous privilege to make sure they get into schools. I still think the president, that's how he got into his schools, but we won't get into that conversation. The amount of privilege and wealth that is different from Black and brown communities to white communities plays a role into this as well.
Okay. Okay. And so with some of the pieces of legislation, I'm assuming there are plans to revamp that, to kind of, as you
So,
mentioned, level the
well, you mean with civil service or just with this
civil service.
legislation in general?
Civil
Well,
service.
civil service, all we're doing right now is knowing that was the next fight.
Okay.
And so we're going to set up a commission. We initially had done it so that if we had passed it in July, as I had hoped, we were going to have the commission work on the next 5 months through now, and then have language so that we can start in January with it. Now that commission is going to be another 6-7 months, and we won't have the language until mid to late next year. But the goal is to sit the folks like me who are adamantly opposed to civil service, to the folks who are with the many folks on the spectrum, to have a conversation around what should we do around civil service. And for many of you, you may know already, there are quite a number of cities who are opting out of civil service because they truly know that they can't get to the level of diversity they want, and the candidates are not in the pool. So, and some of those cities have done that already. So we want to have conversations with cities and police departments that have opted out, those who still opted in, and try to really have a conversation about what is the best way around civil service moving forward. But again, I say all of you should just go on to the civil service website, and you will see literally, you will see almost the top half of almost every grouping is a veteran. And it is very difficult for you to get through that.
Okay, thank you. Do medical personnel employed by state and local governments have qualified immunity?
We all have qualified immunity, yes.
Yeah.
Teachers, politicians, all of us.
Okay.
I didn't know that. So just know I didn't know what qualified immunity was. I'd never seen those two words put together until this debate started. So it is still a learning process for me. Didn't even know I had qualified immunity.
Okay, all righty. Okay, so let's see here. How do we address those who have said that the racial bias issue in civil service has already been dealt with through the civil service exam with a lower score allowed for candidates of color?
I don't understand that question.
I
Lower
don't-
score.
With the
You
lower
passed
score-
the exam at a 70. So what do you mean by lower score? Can that person ask that question again?
Yeah, perhaps if the person who asked this question, if they could actually reinterpret the question.
Okay. Sure.
Are you optimistic that the governor will sign the bill?
I've talked to Charlie a couple of times already. He and I had a discussion last week about the Boston Globe article. Actually, we text back and forth about the Boston Globe article where we saw all of the egregious behavior that had happened with some of those police officers. Sounded like from all the conversations in that text that he was still in the same space where the caucus was, but this is a much more expansive bill than what we initially had proposed. So rest assured, I'll be calling the governor, or he'll be calling me, I'm sure, at some point in the next day or two after. So the answer, I think someone said today, well, you saw the governor stand up there and say what to me, what he says every single time, can he get the bill? So once he gets the bill, he's gonna let his lawyers and stuff go through it. And quite frankly, there have been many times or several times they have found things that can make things better. So I'm hoping he'll look at it and we'll go from there. But I'm hopeful that he will. I guess is the quick answer to your question.
Okay. So the second part of this, what happens if he doesn't?
Well, what happens if he doesn't? He has 10 days. He can send it back. He can do nothing. He can pocket veto it. If he does not sign the bill, it comes back and we tried, which is what the Republicans and the 67 people who voted against it are hoping, that he sends it back and doesn't sign it, so we can pretty much kind of start this conference committee process again to see if we can come to something that people are more agreeable to.
Okay.
But it still needs to get done by January 3rd or whenever we're back, first Wednesday in January, because if not, it starts all over again.
Okay.
With the new legislative session. We are a totally different legislature come first Wednesday in January.
Okay. All righty. I don't know if there are any more questions. There is.
Can the governor veto sections? Yes, he can veto sections, but if he sends anything back with a veto or an amendment, it will put us back into a debate process, which I think makes this more and more challenging.
Okay. Okay. The other question was reframed. Can you explain how qualified immunity differs from immunity coverage provided to police by their local community? It's the same thing, is it?
It is, and that's part of what we were talking about. So one of the things what we were talking about before about how there were phone calls that were coming into this building from spouses saying we're going to take everything. That still in itself is a lie as well, because what he's talking about, or the person who asked the question is mentioning, it is still the city or the municipality who's held liable. So even as the language changed today with civil, with qualified immunity, if someone was found at fault, it was the city that has been paying these very large bills.
Okay.
I just have to ask one question. Do we have another vote or what's happening? Oh, I see. So we're gonna try to do all of that tonight. We are enacting now? Okay, so we're not done. Okay, no problem. Thanks, guys. Sorry, you guys are literally in the middle of.
Better than the Queen's Gambit tonight. Here we go. It's riveting TV right now in real time.
So what is happening?
So what happens is it was a Senate bill. So the House then, we passed it. Now it's gonna go back to them to be enacted, and then it'll come back to us to be enacted, and then it'll go to the governor's desk.
Wow. Okay. All right. So next steps.
Next step, I think someone says what to do about your rep and your senator. Well, I can tell you, I just wrote down because I was on the phone with you. I didn't write down the 67 people who just voted against it in the House side, but rest assured, I text out the 12 names of the people who voted against it in the Senate to the caucus. Yeah, you should call them, ask them why. I think that would be a very important thing if your senator or rep did vote against it. I think they're going to tell you the same things I just told you. Makeup of the board, we're robbing the unions of their power. They don't have due process. And, you know, I'm a financial planner as well as a state rep. And I just know that someone called me today and said, well, rep, why is it that you believe that other people who don't have my job should be able to tell me I shouldn't have my job? And I said, you know, it's just crazy. As a financial planner, you don't have to have all your licenses that I have to have and certifications to know whether or not I robbed you or not. I mean, I don't think that's a person. You don't have to be certified to know whether or not I took your money incorrectly. And it just, you know, it smacks in the face of what we do with a jury system every single day. We don't ask every jury to be certified in whatever, you know, employment that these people might be being found liable for, and to think that that is really the criteria that the board should have nothing but law enforcement on it, because that's the only way that this would be fair to police officers. It's crazy. To me, that's certainly what you might hear, in that, you know, these folks who are not police officers or not law enforcement should not make a decision of whether or not they should not have their job. And I think we make those decisions in courts every single day.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just giving a last chance for any other questions.
I'm going to give a glance at anything else that I think might be important as I look at the summary, as I've been talking about it from earlier today. I think that's most of it. Yep.
Okay. All right, so thank you so much. Rep Holmes, this was very informative. Thank you so much for allowing us to be, you know, part of the process, I guess, in a sense, or.
Well, you were definitely part of the process, because I did not know that I did not have you on mute for a moment, and they were texting me. That was the text going across the screen. Russell, go on mute. Go on mute.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. All righty. Thank you. And if there aren't any more questions, I don't know, Jen, do you have anything? Or
No, that was it. Thank you. We will be sure to send everyone this recording. We congratulate you, Rep Holmes, on all of your hard work. We're behind you 100%. We will be sending out an action alert to have our membership call and email the governor's office. We want to sign a strong police reform bill, and you have our support. And we look forward to what the next steps are for the Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus. We definitely want to be partners with you and do whatever we can.
Well, can I just plug that as we wrap up?
Yes.
I can tell you the caucus members that are Hispanic really took a back seat and said, we are going to really let the Black reps and the Black reps run with this, because their number one concern, which will be our number one concern, I'm sure, next year, would be where they see police interaction that is horrible, and that is with the Latino community not having driver's licenses. And so the the fact that we encourage folks to essentially commit a crime by if they get into an accident and then leave that scene because they're more frightened about whether or not they may be deported or whether or not they're of course going to be found without a driver's license. We've had this conversation with the governor, I think 3 times in our quarterly meetings. That will be where we're going to begin next year. I'm very grateful that they did not make that a must-have inside of this bill because we almost was at that point, and that I think would have certainly not even has gotten us the vote that we have, but it will be something we're going to need your support on in the next term.
Yes, the league does support driver's licenses for all, and we've been advocating that for this entire session. So we're definitely on board.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can celebrate tonight.
We're hoping. So
Once
you have a great
closer.
night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
night.
you, everyone. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.